Tony Daunt is the executive director of the Michigan Freedom Fund on our AT&T line this Firekeepers Casino Friday with Michael Patrick Shiels. Welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning, sir. Happy Friday. Hoping the weather is as nice today as it's been the rest of the week here.
Well, we'll find out from John McMurray in just a couple of minutes, and we'll find out what the Republican convention is going to look like. I put convention in quotation marks after what we've saw in the last 3 days because everybody has to adjust without the formal convention, and the president says there will have more live speakers than the Democrat National Convention did.
Yeah, it's certainly an odd situation, this whole year, and as things have struggled to in some ways try to get back to normal. It just I think adds, at least for me, some further confusion. It's tough to tell what time of year it is because you've got Stanley Cup playoffs on TV. Kids aren't actually going back to school, and yet it's late August, and I'm like, what in the heck time of year is it here? And then with these conventions, the main part of convention is going and partying and drinking the free booze, and that's not happening either. So.
And this is the time of year, if you live in the Lansing area, that at some stage or another you would hear marching band music sort of drifting through the air as the band would be practicing, and I noticed that hasn't been happening yet. And what will happen, too, is a very different sort of election. The president's saying he will deploy law enforcement to the polls on Election Day to prevent voter fraud. He doesn't like mail-in voting. He votes absentee, and so does his family. And you may have noticed that Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State for Michigan, got national airplay yesterday talking about the mail-in voting that's going to happen en masse during this November election. Here she is.
There is absolutely zero difference between voting by mail and voting absentee. Millions of Americans have been voting absentee for decades.
And she says the president and his family and their vote absentee as well by mail.
Donald Trump, his family, his staff, they all vote by mail. In fact, in states like Colorado, Utah, and Oregon, voters have been voting by mail for years. Republicans and Democrats agree it is safe.
Tony Daunt, Michigan Freedom Fund, do you understand the distinction the president's trying to make between voting absentee and voting by mail?
I wish I could. I honestly do, and I disagree with much of what Jocelyn Benson does and what she's trying to do to our election system here. But in this instance, she's basically spot on that, aside from the absentee voters who go to the clerk's office, like myself, I go to the clerk if I'm going to vote absentee, and I ask for I get the application, fill it out, get the ballot, fill it out, and give it to them right then and there rather than put it through the mail. And that's just, for me, a personal comfort thing. But the vast majority of people who vote absentee do it through the mail. Or they go drop it off at a drop box or drop it at the clerk's office. But that's the problem. There are potential for fraud, and I think we just saw recently the canvassers in Wayne County are asking for an investigation because of some 70% of the precincts, with absentee ballots, the counts were off, and so that's a significant problem. We need to make sure every vote is counted properly, that the opportunity for fraud is minimal, if not zero. And so there are very valid points to be made. But with just the ham-fisted, over-the-top way that this president talks about things, it makes an opportunity to have a discussion about those so much more difficult. And it does a disservice, and I think that ultimately it can possibly hurt Republicans at the polls, too, and on Election Day, because of scared enough Republicans into the idea that voting absentee is just ripe for fraud and something they shouldn't do, that may just dissuade them from voting at all. And I think the president needs to be careful about how many people he dissuades from voting for him.
And Jocelyn Benson, according to MERS News, is now advising anybody who is going to vote absentee in November to return their ballot at least 2 weeks ahead of the election. That's whether you drop it off in person or you send it by mail.
Yeah, and that for me, that's something I probably would tend to do. But we need to make sure that the system is set up so that people who want to hold on to their ballot to the last minute can do so. And if they want to hold on to it until the day before and go drop it off at the clerk's office, they should have that right. They shouldn't be made to feel like it's the wrong thing to do by the Secretary of State, the lead administrator of elections in this state. And I think that's kind of the same type of reckless rhetoric that the president engages in sometimes too. And the Democrats, just with this, post office moral panic, and now, suddenly the post office is this great American tradition we need to protect. It's foolishness. The post office has been struggling for years. It doesn't make any money, and they found something else they can glom onto for a few days or a week, and froth everybody up. But the reality of the matter is, if you want to vote absentee, you will have that ability to do so. And I think both sides need to take a step back from this ridiculous rhetoric, because it just undermines the faith in our elections and in our system, and we can't afford that.
In fact, the White House economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, says it's probably the case that we have too many post offices across the country. And sometimes you get novel ideas like putting the post office in the grocery store, or finding ways to streamline and make it more business sensible. But anyway, it's interesting how, yes, all of a sudden that there's a panic about that. Just very quickly, too, it occurred to me that if you do turn your ballot in early, you can go back and recall it and change it if you want to, as I understand it. And that could create lots of complications as well, too. So, I don't
Excellent
know.
point.
Let's see what happens then. I don't know. Michigan Freedom Fund, Tony Daunt. If you Google it, you can support it. You can subscribe to the Front Lines of Freedom, and you can hear right there that he's not afraid to speak his truth, no matter what side of the aisle it comes from. Thank you, Tony.